In the ancient city of Baghdad, where golden sunlight warmed the sandstone walls, there lived a young man named Sinbad. He wasn't like the other young men who were content with life in the bustling markets. Sinbad was born with a restless spirit, a deep curiosity, and a powerful longing for the unknown. Every evening, after the traders closed their shops and the camels returned to their yards, Sinbad would sit at his wooden table. Spread before him were maps, sea charts, and a faded navigation diary. This diary was his most prized possession, a legacy from his father, a great mariner who had been lost to the sea years ago. His mother, her face etched with a loving worry, would watch him. "Sinbad," she'd say softly, "you read that book every night. Don't you ever grow tired of it?" Sinbad would smile, his fingers tracing the elegant script on the aged pages. "No, mother." Father wrote down every detail of his voyages, the raging storms, the bustling ports, the hidden treasures, and islands no one has ever seen. When I read his words, it's like I can hear the ocean. I feel the sea calling me. A shadow of sadness would cross his mother's face. "And that is what I fear," she'd whisper. The sea had given her a husband, and the sea had taken him away. Sinbad would stand, placing his hand gently over hers. "Father never ran from the sea," he said, his voice firm but kind. "He lived bravely, and I want to honor that. I want to live a life worthy of his memory, not hide from it." He didn't want to just inherit his father's house, he wanted to inherit his courage. Just then, a sharp knock echoed through the room. Their friend Amir, a merchant with a cheerful face and an eye for opportunity, burst in. "Sinbad," he exclaimed, his voice full of excitement. "I have news! A new trading expedition leaves for the eastern seas tomorrow morning. The winds are good, the ships are strong, and the captain, they say he knows the sea better than anyone alive. This is your chance, my friend. The chance you've been waiting for." Sinbad's eyes lit up. He looked at his mother, a silent question passing between them. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also a deep understanding. She knew this day would come. She knew she couldn't hold back the tide, nor could she hold back her son. With a heavy sigh, she nodded. "If you must go," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "then go with Allah's protection. May He watch over you where I cannot." Sinbad pulled her into a tight hug, a wordless promise to return. The scent of her familiar perfume filled his senses, a memory he would carry with him across the vast, lonely ocean. The next morning, the port of Baghdad was a whirlwind of activity. The air was thick with the smell of sea salt, spices, and wet wood. Sailors shouted orders from high in the rigging. Ropes creaked under the strain of heavy cargo, and the waves lapped against the wooden hulls of magnificent ships. Among them was the grandest vessel of all. The Sea Hawk. Its mast seemed to touch the clouds. Its sails were neatly furled, and its figurehead, a fierce bird of prey, stared out towards the open water. Sinbad approached, carrying only a small bag with a few belongings and his father's precious diary. He saw the captain, a seasoned sailor named Hamad, overseeing the loading. Hamad had sharp, intelligent eyes that had seen 1,000 horizons and a thick braided beard grayed by sun and salt. "Captain Hamad," Sinbad called out, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. Hamad turned, his gaze sweeping over the young man. "Yes." "What is it?" "I request passage on your ship," Sinbad declared. "I can work. I'm strong, and I learn fast. I will earn my keep." Hamad studied him for a long moment, a skeptical look on his face. "You look too soft for sea work," he grunted. "This is a hard life, not a pleasure cruise for a boy from the city." Sinbad straightened his shoulders, his pride stung. He met the captain's gaze without flinching. "Try me," he said. The words a simple, powerful challenge. A slow smirk spread across Captain Hamid's weathered face. He appreciated the young man's fire. "Fine," he said with a nod. He pointed towards a group of rough-looking sailors coiling ropes on the main deck. "Take your place with the deck crew. We'll see if that spirit of yours survives the first storm. You'll earn your bread by the strength in your back and the sweat on your brow." And so, Sinbad's journey began. The first days at sea were a brutal awakening. The work was relentless. He hauled heavy, abrasive ropes until his hands were raw and bleeding. He climbed the towering mast, the ship swaying dizzyingly beneath him, the wind whipping at his face. He scrubbed the decks, polished brass fittings, and learned the intricate art of tying knots that could hold fast in a gale. His muscles ached in ways he never knew possible. His skin burned under the unforgiving sun. The other sailors, hardened men of the sea, were not unkind, but they offered no special treatment. He was just another pair of hands. But Sinbad did not complain. He did everything he was asked and more. During the day, he worked until sweat poured down his face. And at night, when the ship was a silent silhouette against a sky full of brilliant stars, he would find a quiet corner on the deck. Who'd pull out his father's diary and, by the dim light of a lantern, he would read. He matched the constellations in the sky to the charts his father had drawn. He recited the names of distant ports, memorized the patterns of winds and currents, and absorbed every piece of wisdom his father had left behind. His hands became calloused, his skin turned a deep bronze, and a new hardness settled in his eyes. The softness the captain had seen was being burned away, replaced by the quiet determination of a man finding his true purpose. He was no longer just the son of a great mariner. He was becoming one himself. The sea was testing him, and Sinbad was determined to prove he was worthy. His great adventure had truly begun. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed Sinbad's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of adventure. Have you ever felt lost, like the world was against you, and all you had was a flicker of hope? This is the story of a boy who faced the wrath of the sea, the fury of monsters, and found the courage to become a legend. This is the story of Sinbad. Our tale begins on the bustling deck of the Sea Hawk, a trading ship cutting through the waves. A young Sinbad, barely a man, fumbles with a rope, his hands clumsy and sore. The seasoned sailors around him can't help but chuckle. One laughs, his voice carried on the salty wind. "Look at the boy! He may break before he learns to tie a proper knot." Sinbad grits his teeth, his pride stung but his determination unshaken. "I will learn," he mutters, a promise to himself more than to anyone else. 1 week passes. The vast open sea stretches to the horizon. A shimmering blue canvas under a brilliant sky. Seabirds circle high above, their calls echoing over the water. Sinbad now stands at the helm, the great wheel steady in his hands. Beside him is Captain Hamid, a man whose eyes hold the wisdom of 1,000 voyagers. The captain points to the sky. "When you can read the stars, the sea will never hide her path from you." Sinbad nods, his gaze thoughtful. "My father wrote the same," he replies softly. Hearing this, a look of new respect crosses the captain's face. He sees not just a clumsy boy, but the son of a great navigator. That night, as the Sea Hawk sails under a blanket of stars, Sinbad sits alone on the deck. By the dim light of a lantern, he writes in his diary, a leather-bound book that holds his thoughts, his fears, and his dreams. Every night, Sinbad recorded the details of his journey, charting his own growth alongside the ship's course. He poured his heart onto the pages, not knowing that very soon the sea would test him in ways he could never have imagined. As if on cue, a low rumble of thunder echoes in the distance. The wind, once a gentle breeze, begins to rise, whipping the sails with a sudden fierceness. A sailor, his face pale with alarm, points to the horizon. Storm clouds, "Captain!" he yells. The once peaceful sky transforms into a churning mass of dark, angry grey. The sea, moments ago calm, begins to swell. The storm hits, with the force of a battering ram. Huge, monstrous waves crash against the ship, throwing it from side to side like a child's toy. Rain and sea spray lash the deck, blinding the crew. Sailors shout orders, their voices nearly lost in the roar of the wind as they fight to control the raging vessel. "Secure the sails! Move, Captain!" Hammered bellows, his voice a beacon of command in the chaos. Sinbad clings to the rails, drenched and shivering, his knuckles white. The sheer power of the storm is terrifying, a force of nature that threatens to swallow them whole. In that moment of pure fear, he closes his eyes and whispers a prayer into the gale. "Father, guide me." Just then, an enormous wave, a moving wall of black water, smashes across the deck. A scream cuts through the storm's fury. The sailor is ripped from his post, thrown overboard, and vanishes into the raging, dark sea. "Man overboard!" someone cries out in horror. Captain Hammett's face is a grim mask, his jaw tight. "We can't go back," he shouts, the terrible truth hanging in the air. "The storm will kill us all." The storm rages harder, as if determined to tear the Seahawk apart. Lightning cracks across the sky, illuminating the terrifying scene in brilliant momentary flashes. The ship groans under the strain, its timbers creaking in protest. Hope seems all but lost. But then, through the sheets of rain and the oppressive darkness, a shout pierces the chaos. "Land! I see land!" A sailor is pointing, his finger trembling. Through the storm, a dark, hulking shape appears on the horizon and island. By dawn, the world is transformed. The storm has vanished as quickly as it arrived, leaving behind a calm sea and a quiet, misty morning. The battered Seahawk is anchored in a peaceful bay near a lush green island. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and unknown flowers, and the songs of exotic birds fill the air. A mysterious mist hangs over the dense jungle, shrouding the island in an aura of secrets. The crew, exhausted but alive, makes their way ashore. Captain Hammett gathers them. "We'll rest here and repair the ship," he announces. "Search the island. Food, water, anything useful. But be careful." Sinbad, eager to explore, joins a small group heading inland. They walk through the thick jungle until they emerge into a wide, grassy meadow. The field is strangely empty, eerily silent, except for the buzzing of insects. It feels unnatural, as if something has scared all the wildlife away. Suddenly, one of the sailors stops short. "What is that?" he whispers, his eyes wide. There, in the middle of the field, lies something impossible. A gigantic white object, smooth and oval-shaped, gleaming in the morning sun. It's taller than a man, bigger than any boulder. The men approach it slowly, a mix of awe and disbelief on their faces. "Is this a bird's egg?" Sinbad murmurs, his voice barely audible. It seems preposterous, yet there it is. The crew circles the colossal egg, their fear giving way to a foolish curiosity. One sailor, bolder than the rest, draws his sword. With a grin, he taps the hard shell. Sinbad's eyes widen in alarm. "No, don't, but it's too late." A sharp crack echoes across the meadow. At that exact moment, a colossal shadow falls over them, plunging the sunlit field into sudden twilight. Every head snaps upward. A creature of myth, of nightmare, is descending from the sky. Its wings are wider than the Seahawk itself, blotting out the sun. It is the ROC, the legendary bird king of the seas. A blood-curdling screech rips through the air as its massive talons, each the size of a sword, slam into the ground near the egg. Run! A sailor screams in pure terror. The crew scatters in every direction, running for their lives. The mighty ROC flaps its wings, creating a hurricane-force wind, its eyes burning with fury at the sight of its disturbed egg. Sinbad dives behind a large rock, pressing himself flat against the ground as the enraged bird shrieks, its anger shaking the very earth. They had stumbled into the nest of a monster and awakened its wrath. Minutes feel like hours. Back on the beach, the sailors left behind to guard the ship hear the terrifying sounds from the island's interior. One of them, looking to the sky, sees the gargantuan shape approaching. The ROC is coming this way. He screams, pointing with a shaking hand. Captain Hammond, supervising the repairs, sees the shadow growing larger, racing across the sand towards them. The legendary bird, its rage now directed at the strange wooden vessel in its bay, was about to unleash its full power upon them all. Their only hope was the sea, but could they escape in time? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next adventure. Hammond screams, "Cut the ropes! We sail now!" Just as our ship lurches forward, the gigantic ROC swoops from the sky, its shriek piercing the air. It drops massive rocks from its claws, one smashing into the deck with a deafening crash. Sailors scream, some falling overboard into the churning sea. I leap onto the moving ship, the last rope snapping behind me, the island already feeling a world away. Oh. Out on the open sea, the nightmare continues. The ROC relentlessly attacks, hurling boulder after boulder. Its strength is terrifying, each impact shaking the ship to its core. "We need cover!" I shout over the chaos. "We can't outrun it." Hammond, his face grim, yells back, then pray that the sea shows mercy. And perhaps it does. After what feels like an eternity, the monstrous bird gives up, its form shrinking into the distance, leaving our ship battered and broken, but still afloat. The crew collapses, gasping for breath, relief and exhaustion etched on every face. A sailor whispers, "We survived. But at what cost?" I look back at the island, the image of that giant egg burned into my mind. I can't help but say, we should never have touched that egg. Hammond just nods, the grim understanding passing between us. 4 days. The sea is calm. Fragile peace settles over the crew as we work to repair the damage. We mourn the lost, but the will to survive is a powerful force. Just as we start to believe the worst is over, a Belukut's cry shatters the quiet. "Ship ahead!" We all rush to the rail. It's a large vessel, floating silently, its sails torn, with no sign of a crew, an eerie, abandoned ghost ship. A mixture of curiosity and dread fills the air. We need supplies, and this ship might hold them. But it could also hold something far worse. Hammond gives the order, and we board cautiously, our hands on our swords, every shadow a potential threat. The moment we step onto the deck, a scene of absolute horror greets us. Bodies are scattered everywhere. Men, women, all lifeless, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. "What happened here?" a sailor asks, his voice trembling. The silence that follows is heavy, suffocating. Suddenly, a sound echoes from below deck. Heavy, rhythmic footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. They're getting closer. From the darkness of a doorway, a colossal figure emerges. A giant of a man, his face painted with stark white markings, his eyes glowing with a terrifying, primal hunger. He isn't just a man, he's a monster. Hello. Grell rumbles from his chest, the words sending ice through our veins. Fresh meat. Sailors scream in pure terror. Back to the ship. Move, Sinbad bellows, his command cutting through the panic. But it's too late for one man. Giant's massive hand snatches him from the deck, crushing him with sickening ease. I react on instinct, slashing at the giant's leg with my scimitar, but the blade barely scratches the skin. He's too strong, I yell through giant roars and anger, swinging a massive club that smashes the wall right beside me, splintering wood like it's paper. The remaining sailors scramble, fleeing for their lives, a desperate stampede back to our own ship. Men leap frantically from the ghost ship's rail onto our deck. We cast off immediately, pulling away from the cursed vessel. Hammond frantically looks around, his eyes wide with desperation, counting the survivors. Where are the others? He demands, though he already knows the answer. The horror is clear on my face as I force the words out. They didn't make it. A heavy, gut-wrenching silence falls over the crew. The joy of our own survival is poisoned by the grief for those left behind. Hammond looks at me, his expression a mixture of sorrow and resignation. The sea gives, and the sea takes, he says, his voice hollow. I clench my fists, anger and sorrow warring within me. I look to the horizon, to the unknown that still awaits. We must continue, I declare, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Their deaths cannot be for nothing. I exed, deck night, the Seahawk creaks and groans under the moonlight. Sinbad sits cross-legged, scribbling in his diary by flickering lantern light. Sinbadvo. The Seahawk sails on, though wounded, and so are we. He pauses, eyes fixed on the distant horizon, moonlight reflecting in the calm waters. Narrator, V.O. Sinbad had faced more death in a single week than most men endure in a lifetime. Yet the sea had only just begun testing him. The ship limps forward. Torn sails flap like wounded wings. The mast leans at a dangerous angle, and the crew moves wearily across the deck. Sinbad rises, standing at the bow, jaws set. Captain Hammond approaches, his face drawn and grim. Hammond 8 good men. Gone yesterday. The cannibal. He took them like a butcher taking cattle. Sinbad exhales slowly, determination sharpening in his eyes. Sinbad, we need fresh water. Supplies, repairs, or none of us survive. Ahmed nods grimly. Suddenly, look out, Sailor Island ahead. Eastward, the crew rushes to the rails. Through the morning haze, a lush island appears, crowned with green forests and calm beaches. Hammond set course, anchors down. Next island, shore day, the Seahawk drops anchor. Sailors carry crates and tools onto the sand, cautious and alert. Hammond, stay sharp. Calm can be a trap. The men fan out into the forest. Sinbad's gaze drifts to strange carvings on the trees. Spirals, moons, symbols of some unknown origin. Captain, someone's been here before. Tribes, maybe. But where are they now? A sudden cracker. Branch snaps nearby. Every man freezes. Silence falls like a shroud. Ixed forest path continuous. Sinbad, Hammond, and 4 sailors move cautiously. Birds take flight overhead. A distant, eerie chanting drifts through the trees. Sailor 2, whispering, hear that? They advance, each step careful, hearts hammering. ISSDRUINS, day. A circular stone platform emerges, vines crawling over its surface. Broken cages and abandoned weapons litter the ground. This looks like a prison. Hammond kneels, examining a massive footprint pressed into the dirt. What is it? Hammond, the cannibal giant. He followed us here. Sailor 1, impossible. across the sea. Hammered, baby, he lives here. Perhaps our last ship was his hunting ground? Suddenly, boom, boom. The ground shakes. Sinbad move. Now, next forest. Continuous branches whip past as the crew runs. Heavy footsteps crash behind them. Sailor 2, he's close. Through the trees, the cannibal giant bursts forth, swinging a massive club fashioned from a ship's mast. Cannibal growling fresh meat. There, the club strikes down a sailor instantly. Sinbad's eyes widen in horror. Go. Run. The remaining sailors reach the shore. The Seahawk bobs on the waves, signal the ship. Send the longboat, look out. Waves frantically, they see us. But the giant crashes through the tree line behind them. You cannot escape. 2 seizes a sailor and hurls him into the rocks. Sinbad spots a burning torch near the wreck. Sinbad, hey! Over here he hurls the torch into spilled oil. Flames roar to life, forming a wall between the crew and the giant. Cannibal roaring to the boat? Now, IX'd. Shore, waterline. The longboat reaches the beach. Sailors clamber aboard, hands gripping the ropes. Sinbad scans. Frantically, Hammad is missing. Captain? Where are you? He races back. Hammad lies on the sand, leg crushed. The giant lumbers toward him. Hammad, Sinbad. Leave me. Sinbad, never. Sinbad lifts Hammad and drags him toward the longboat. The giant raises his club. Cannibal, you feed the rocks. Sinbad spots a fallen spear. Heart-pounding, he grabs it and drives it into the giant's foot. The monstrous roar echoes across the island. We're talking about the legendary escape from the island of the giant. This isn't just about action. It's a masterclass in building tension, showcasing character, and setting the stage for even greater perils. So grab your popcorn, because we're about to analyze every heart-pounding moment. The scene explodes into action with a deafening roar. The giant, a monstrous cannibal, finally collapses to one knee. This is the moment. The one sliver of a chance for our heroes. Sand and dirt spray into the air, creating a chaotic, dusty haze. Without a second's hesitation, Sinbad grabs the injured Hammad. You can practically feel the strain in his muscles as he drags his friend across the sand. Every ounce of his energy focused on one single goal: reaching the water, reaching safety. It's a desperate, raw display of loyalty and strength, setting the tone for the entire escape. Just moments later, we cut to the longboat already battling the ocean. It crests a wave, a tiny wooden vessel against the vast, unforgiving sea. The sailors are giving it everything they've got, their faces etched with a mixture of terror and determination. You hear the desperate cries, "Row! Row!" It's not just a command, it's a plea, a prayer. And then, the true horror begins. The giant, having recovered, doesn't just give up. He leaps into the surf. The scale of this creature is terrifying. The water doesn't just splat, it explodes in a colossal wall of frothy waves, as if a mountain just fell into the sea. The tension ratchets up to an unbearable level. The giant swings his massive, crude club. You see it arc through the air, a blur of motion aimed directly at the fleeing longboat. It crashes into the water, missing them by mere inches. The sound is deafening, and the impact sends a shockwave that violently lurches the boat. The crew is drenched in spray, their knuckles white as they grip the oars, rowing for their very lives. The giant's enraged roar echoes across the water, a promise of what would happen if they were caught. You can feel their panic, the sheer adrenaline of the moment. Every pull of the oars is a defiance of death. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of desperate struggle, a dark silhouette appears against the moonlight. The sight of it is a beacon of hope in the terrifying darkness. The final push to reach the ship is the most frantic of all. On the deck of the Seahawk, the crew hauls the injured Hamad aboard. He winces in pain, but he's alive. Sinbad, the hero of the hour, simply collapses beside him, gasping for air, the adrenaline finally leaving his system. His words, "That was too close," are a massive understatement. It's a quiet moment that speaks volumes about the ordeal they've just survived. In this moment of respite, we get a beautiful character beat. Hamad, weak but grateful, grabs Sinbad's hand with a faint smile. He says, "You saved my life. Maybe you're a sailor. After all, this is more than just a thank you." It's a moment of profound respect, a bridge between two men from different worlds, forged in the crucible of shared danger. The rest of the crew lets out a quiet, relieved cheer, but the fear hasn't left their eyes. They know how close they came to a gruesome end. This small celebration is tinged with the deep, lingering trauma of their encounter. Later, that night, the Seahawk cuts through the waves, putting distance between itself and the island of nightmares. On the shore, a lonely, powerful figure remains. He's powerless to follow them across the water. But Sinbad, looking back, understands something crucial. He was not just strong. He knew how to hunt, how to stalk. This wasn't a mindless beast. This was a thinking predator. Hamad, ever the pragmatist, finishes the thought. He will hunt again. The implication is terrifying. If there's one, there could be more. Or worse, this one might find a way. Sinbad closes his eyes, the tension returning to his face, a premonition of future dangers. This sequence perfectly transitions from immediate physical threat to a deeper, more psychological dread. The escape is over, but the true danger is just being understood. Later that night, we see Sinbad in his cabin, writing feverishly in his diary. This is how he processes the world, how he makes sense of the impossible. A sudden gust of wind flutters the pages, a classic bit of foreshadowing. We hear his thoughts in a voiceover, giving us a direct window into his mind. "This island was not paradise," he writes. "It was a cage built by the sea. The giant hunts like a beast, but thinks like a man. We must leave these waters quickly." His words confirm our fears. The giant isn't just a monster. He's an intelligent hunter, making him infinitely more dangerous. Modi. And just as this horrifying thought settles in, nature itself decides to conspire against them. The beautiful, clear night vanishes. Dark, ominous clouds roll in with unnatural speed. The sea, their escape route, begins to churn and turn against them. Sinbad looks up, a new kind of despair on his face. No, not another storm. Who's been through this before, and he knows what's coming. The film masterfully stacks crises. There is no rest for our heroes. They've just escaped one seemingly certain death only to be thrown headlong into another. The call comes from the crow's nest. "Captain!" Storm coming from the west. The relative calm of the ship is shattered. Hamad, snapping back into his role as first mate, bellows orders, "Tie everything down." Now. The deck erupts into organized chaos. Ropes snap and whip through the air like angry snakes as Sinbad and the crew scramble to secure the rigging and cargo. The ship lurches violently, a toy in the hands of a gathering tempest. The fight for survival has begun all over again, this time not against a monster of flesh and bone, but against the raw, untamable power of the ocean itself. Now we are in the heart of the storm. The Seahawk is tossed about on colossal waves. Lightning splits the sky, momentarily illuminating a scene of pure chaos, followed by cracks of thunder that sound like the sky itself is breaking apart. Then, the worst happens. With a deafening, sickening crack, the mainmast snaps in half. It crashes to the deck with a devastating roar, a mortal wound to the ship. A sailor screams in terror, "We're going to break apart." And you believe him. The ship is being systematically destroyed. Colossal waves, mountains of black water, slam onto the deck, sweeping away anything not tied down. We see Sinbad and Hamid clinging desperately to the railing, their knuckles white. The spray is so thick it blinds them. The wind so fierce it feels like a physical force trying to rip them from the ship. They are completely at the mercy of the storm. The camera then does something brilliant. Too. It pulls back and back and back until the Seahawk is just a tiny, fragile ship battling a furious, churning sea. It's a breathtaking shot that perfectly encapsulates the central theme of the story: humanity's defiance. They are a tiny beacon of courage and resilience, fighting against a monstrous giant and a monstrous storm, against nature and beast alike. They may be small, they may be battered, but they are not broken. They are still fighting. Net. Where the scene leaves us, breathless and on the edge of our seats. It is an incredible piece of filmmaking that moves from a creature feature escape to a survival-at-sea disaster epic in the span of minutes. It perfectly establishes the stakes, deepens the characters, and promises that the journey ahead will only get more perilous. What did you think of this sequence? 3. Need to lower the sails. There are no sails left. A giant wave, a monstrous wall of black water, crashed over the deck, and just like that, I was thrown into the raging ocean. I sank into the cold, silent darkness. Bubbles streamed upward, my desperate breath escaping to a surface I couldn't reach. I fought the current, my arms and legs burning, struggling to swim, to fight my way back to the air. For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed the ship above me, the mighty sea, hawk splintering in the heart of the storm. I saw men falling, my shipmates, my friends. I saw crates and timbers scattering like toys. Not like this. Not like this. A floating plank, a splinter from my shattered ship, smacked me hard. I grabbed onto it, a desperate lifeline, and it pulled me back to the surface. I bobbed among the wreckage, coughing up seawater, my body shivering uncontrollably. Where was the ship? Where were the others? Lightning flashed, illuminating the chaotic sea for a split second. And in that terrifying light, I saw it. Nothing. The Seahawk was gone, vanished. I was adrift, alone in the vast, angry ocean. One day, after what felt like an eternity, my eyes opened weakly. The storm had passed, leaving behind a bruised, grey dawn. I was still clinging to that broken plank, my lips pale, my breathing slow and shallow. And then I saw it. Through the morning mist, a faint line on the horizon. Shoreline. Another island. A weak smile touched my lips. Land. I started kicking slowly. Use the last of my strength to drift toward it. I collapsed onto the soft sand, barely alive, feeling the grains beneath my battered body. I looked up at the pale sky. Father, the sea is trying to kill me, but I'm still here. And then everything went black. Soft waves washed over my hands, a gentle, rhythmic caress. The cry of seabirds echoed from somewhere above. I slowly opened my eyes. I was bruised, exhausted, and lying on wet sand. I rolled to my knees, coughing up more seawater, the taste of salt burning my throat. I survived. Again. I looked around. No ship, no crew.
No sign of Captain Hamid.
There was nothing but a strange, silent, and seemingly untouched island stretching out before me. I didn't know if any other sailor had lived. The sea had scattered us like leaves in a storm. With a groan, I forced myself to stand and began to stumble inland, away from the unforgiving water. Tall palm trees swayed gently in the breeze. Thick vines twisted across fallen logs. Wild, colorful fruit hung temptingly from the branches. It was a paradise, but one born from a nightmare. I stopped at a small pool of crystal-clear water, cupping it with my hands and drinking deeply. The cool liquid was the most wonderful thing I had ever tasted. And that's when I heard a rustling sound in the bushes behind me. I froze, every muscle tensing. Is someone there? No answer, only the whisper of the wind and the distant calls of birds. I grabbed a heavy, broken branch, my only weapon, and held it like a club. Come out. Still, silence. With my heart pounding, I continued forward, deeper into the unknown. The forest grew darker and more oppressive. The canopies of impossibly tall trees blocked out the sun, plunging the path into a gloomy twilight. 2. I walked cautiously, my injured legs screaming in protest, but my senses were on high alert. A strange thing happened. The birds, which had been so vocal moments before, fell silent. All of them at once. And then I heard them. Whispering voices. They were indistinct, soft, and seemed to echo from the trees all around me. It was impossible to tell where they were coming from. Is someone watching me? I moved carefully, my eyes darting in every direction, listening, waiting. Suddenly, my foot hit something hard in the soft dirt. I looked down. My blood ran cold. A human skull, yellowed with age, lay half buried in the earth. Beside it, a scattering of broken ribs and gnawed bones. Cannibals. Again. The word was a bitter taste in my mouth. I gripped my branch tighter, the wood digging into my palm, and took a slow step back. The rustling started again, louder this time. A shadow, quick and fleeting, moved between the trees just at the edge of my vision. Who's there? No response. Only the suffocating silence of the jungle. Holte. I pushed through a curtain of thick leaves and emerged into a small sun-dappled clearing. In the center stood a terrifying stone idol. It was carved into the shape of a giant's head, with grotesque, bared teeth and hollow, staring eyes that seemed to follow my every move. Piled at its base were more bones, human, bonian, primitive weapons. A faint trail of grey smoke drifted up from a nearby fire pit, the embers still glowing faintly. Someone lives here. The thought was both a hope and a terror. The clearing felt like a trap, an altar for some unspeakable ritual. My simple search for survival had just become something far more dangerous. I wasn't just shipwrecked anymore. I was being hunted. I tightened my grip on my club, my knuckles white, and scanned the trees, waiting for whatever was hiding in the shadows to finally show itself. The island was beautiful, but it was hiding a dark, hungry secret, and I had just stumbled right into its heart. It's Earth. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales of adventure and survival. Don't move. I slowly raised my hands, turning to face the voice. There, a man in tattered clothes holds a long, sharpened spear. He's thin, with tired eyes, and wears makeshift armor like someone shipwrecked long ago. I'm unarmed. He looks skeptical. No one survives here without weapons. His eyes study me for a long moment. You're from the storm. Yes, my ship. It's gone. My captain lost. I survived the wreck. He lowers his spear just a bit. Then you are lucky. Few survive long here. Who are you? Mine is Kareen. I was a sailor like you. I've been on this cursed island for 3 years. Kareen leads me to a hidden shelter, tucked between large rocks and thick vines. Inside, dried meat hangs, Spears lean against the wall, and a small fire burns low. Here hands me a piece of roasted fruit. Eat. You'll need strength. I sit and eat, the first real food I've had since the storm. I'm so grateful. What happened to you? Kareem stares into the fire, his face shadowed with old pain. Our ship was attacked at night by something huge. A giant. The same one that hunts these islands. My eyes widen. The memories flood back. Then it's true. I saw him too. He killed my friends. Kareem nods, his expression grim. He's not alone. There were once more a whole tribe of giant cannibals. Now, only one remains. The last hunter. He roams from island to island, searching for prey. A shiver runs down my spine. How have you survived? He taps his forehead. I hide. I run. I never sleep in the same place twice. It's the only way. That's no life. Kareem looks at me, his eyes hollow and weary. Better a small life than no life at all. But I feel a fire igniting inside me, a refusal to accept this fate. I want to escape. He lets out a painful, bitter laugh. Escape. There is no escape. I tried building boats. They were wrecked. I tried rafts. The storms took them. I even tried swimming. I didn't make it half a mile. I clench my fists, my knuckles white. There must be a way. There has to be. Kareem just sighs, the sound full of defeat. As evening falls, he leads me deeper into the dense jungle. If you want to live here, you must learn the land. We pass enormous claw marks gouged into the trunks of ancient trees. His hunting territory. Always watch the ground. And if you hear drums, run drums. He nods slowly, his eyes dark. He beats drums before a hunt. It means he has found your trail. My jaw tightens. The thought of being hunted like an animal, the sound of drums heralding my own demise. It's terrifying. Later, at sunset, we arrive at a cascading waterfall. Kareem pushes aside a curtain of heavy vines, revealing a hidden cave behind the rushing water. The air inside is cool and damp. Walls are covered in maps, burned directly into the stone. There are piles of shells, old bones, and stacks of handmade tools. It's an entire workshop of survival. You built all this? He shrugs, almost dismissively. Madness keeps me busy. I move closer, my fingers tracing one of the carved maps on the stone wall. These islands, they form a chain. Kareem turns from sharpening a spearhead. Yes, thing. And the giant travels between them, moving from one to the next. A spark of an idea, a flicker of hope, begins to form in my mind. Then maybe there is a gap, a safe sea passage between his patrols. A way out. Kareem frowns, looking at me with a mix of pity and frustration. You think like a man who hasn't suffered enough. I meet his tired gaze, my own determination hardening. We'll see, Theg. There must be a flaw in his pattern, a weakness we can exploit. I won't just hide and wait to die. I will find a way off this island, or I will die trying to make one. For my captain, for my friends, I will not let their deaths be for nothing. This is not the end of my story. Sinbad, or like a man who hasn't given up yet. Kareem looks away, ixed. Forest, night, Sinbad and Kareem gather wood. Suddenly distant drums. Soft, slow, rhythmic. Kareem's face drains of color. Karim, whispering he's hunting. The drums get louder. Sinbad, he knows we're here. Kareem grabs Sinbad's arm. Kareem, run now! They sprint through the forest. Tree branches whip across their faces. Birds burst into the sky. The drums boom louder and louder. Sinbad, he's close. Kareem pushes Sinbad behind a fallen log. Kareem, be silent. Don't breathe loud. They crouch in darkness. Heavy footsteps shake the ground. Through the branches, we see the cannibal giant face painted, holding a burning torch and a huge club carved from a mast. He sniffs the air like a beast tracking prey. Cannibal, come out. Little men. Tay takes a slow step. Then another. He is right in front of their hiding place. Sinbad's heart pounds. The giant lowers his torch. Flame light flickers inches from Sinbad's face through the leaves. Cannibal, I smell fear. Sinbad holds his breath. A moment passes. Then the giant turns and moves away. The footsteps fade. Kareem slowly exhales. Kareem, he didn't see us. Suddenly, snap! Kareem's sandal strap breaks, making a sharp noise. The giant stops walking. Silence. Then Cannibal OS. There you are. The giant roars and charges back toward them. Kareem, run! They sprint. Ixta forest continuous branches crack. The ground shakes. The giant crashes through trees, gaining on them. Kareem pulls Sinbad aside into a narrow cliff path. Kareem, this way. They squeeze through stone walls too narrow for the giant. He reaches in, trying to grab them but cannot fit. Kareem and Sinbad keep running until they reach another clearing near the river. Both collapse to their knees, gasping, Ixt. Riverbank Knight Kareem looks at Sinbad. Kareem, you understand now? On this island, the giant always hunts. You can't fight him. Sinbad looks up, eyes burning with determination. Sinbad, everything can be fought. Everything has a weakness. Kareem turns away. Kareem, hope will kill you. Here, Sinbad. Sinbad stares out at the dark jungle. Sinbad, no. Giving up, will I ext. Forest hilltop later, Sinbad climbs a high ridge alone. He looks across the tree canopy. In the distance, firelight glows from another hill. Sinbad, whispering his camp. He pulls out a broken piece of sailor's metal, sharpening it with a stone. Sinbadvo. If the giant could track men, then men must learn to track him. Sinbad's determination becomes clear. He is no longer just trying to survive. He is preparing for war. The night. Inside the stone chamber was long and full of terror. Sinbad and the remaining sailors hid behind piles of giant bones, barely breathing. The cannibal giant slept nearby, his snoring echoing like rolling thunder inside the cave. Every man was trembling. Some prayed. Some stared at the floor, eyes empty. They had lost many friends in just one night. Sinbad, however, kept his mind steady. Fear was strong, but survival was stronger. He leaned close to his men and whispered, "Listen carefully. When the giant wakes, he will kill us one by one. We must escape before sunrise." The men nodded silently. The plan they needed, a distraction. Something to give them time. Sinbad looked around. There were broken weapons, bones, bits of smoldering wood, and a large iron spit the giant used to roast his victims. Sinbad picked up the iron spit. It was heavy, but sharp at the end. "If we blind him," he whispered, "he will not catch us in the dark." The sailors stared at him. "Blind him? Captain, he is huge." "Yes," Sinbad said, "but he is only one creature. If we act together, we have a chance." The sailors swallowed their fear and agreed. Fades. Prepared quietly. One man gathered burning wood. 2 men lifted the iron spit. Another prepared to open the stone door as soon as the giant was hurt. The flames flickered on the giant's monstrous sleeping shape. Time was running out. Sinbad took a deep breath and said, "When I give the signal." The blazing attacked suddenly. The giant stirred. His massive hand reached into a pile of bones, as if looking for another snack. The sailors froze, afraid he had woken, but after a moment, he settled again. Sinbad nodded. Now. The plan exploded into action. The men rushed forward with the burning wood and iron spit. They shoved the glowing hot metal into a torch flame until it turned red with heat. Then, with a shout, they ran at the giant. Vikrit's eyes snapped open just as Sinbad and two men slammed the blazing iron spit into his face. A-A-A-A-R-R-R-R-R-G-H-H-H-H. The giant roared in agony, thrashing wildly. He grabbed one man and crushed him instantly against the wall, but the others ran. Sinbad yelled, "Open the door!" The man at the gate pushed with all his strength, and the giant stone door cracked open just enough for the sailors to slip through. Behind them, the blinded monster howled in rage, smashing the cave walls and hurling rocks blindly. Sinbad shouted, "Run! To the forest!" They sprinted into the darkness of the trees. A horror in the wood's branches whipped their faces. Thorns tore at their clothes. They did not stop. Behind them, they heard, boom, boom, boom. The giant was chasing them, even blind. He crashed through the forest, pulling down trees as if they were tiny weeds. The sailors ran harder than they had ever run in their lives. One sailor stumbled and fell. Sinbad tried to help, but the giant's hand came smashing down too fast. The man screamed once Sand fell silent. Sinbad forced himself to keep running. "Forgive me," he whispered. Escaped to the shore after what felt like hours of running. The trees ended, and the survivors reached the beach again. They had lost more men. Now only 3 sailors remained with Sinbad. Their ship was gone. They had no boat, no shelter, and the giant was still behind them. One sailor fell to his knees. "We are doomed, Captain. Doomed." Sinbad refused to give up. "No. If we still breathe, we fight." But how? The surviving sailors looked around desperately, the giant's roars still echoing in the trees. Then, one of them pointed up at the cliffs, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Look! Another bird's nest!" High above them, nestled on a sheer rock face, was another gigantic nest, and inside it, a single, enormous egg. The parent ROC was nowhere in sight. A wild, desperate idea sparked in Sinbad's mind. It was dangerous. It was insane, but it was their only hope. "We will hide in the egg," he. The other sailors stared at him, their faces a mixture of terror and disbelief. "Inside the egg." "Yes," Sinbad said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "When the ROC returns, it will carry the egg away to safety. Anywhere is better than this cursed island. The giant cannot reach us in the sky." They had no time to waste. Thround, the ground began to shake again, the giant's heavy footsteps drawing closer, each one a hammer blow against their nerves. The survivors scrambled towards the rock wall, their hands finding any purchase they could. They climbed as fast as their exhausted bodies would allow. Sinbad pushed the others up ahead of him before scrambling up himself. They reached the nest just as the giant crashed out of the forest below, his monstrous voice roaring, "I will eat you!" Working frantically, the men tore open a section of the massive egg. The shell was tough, but their desperation gave them strength. One by one, they crawled inside. A warm, thick liquid immediately covered their bodies. The smell was overpowering, a strange, pungent odor that made them gag, but they had no other choice. Sinbad was the last one in. He pulled the cracked pieces of the shell back into place, sealing them inside the dark, wet prison. Inside, It was pitch black. They could hear everything. The giants screaming in frustration below, the sound of trees being ripped from the earth, rocks smashing against the cliffside. And then, a new sound. Frantic flapping of colossal wings, and a shadow fell over the egg, blocking out the last slivers of light. The ROC had returned. The giant bird let out a piercing screech as it landed on the edge of its nest. Its sharp eyes immediately spotted the source of the commotion below. It saw the giant cannibal attacking its nest, threatening its young. Fury overtook the magnificent creature. With another ear-splitting cry, the ROC dove from the cliff, its talons extended like massive grappling hooks. It swooped down and snatched the giant in its powerful claws. The cannibal kicked and screamed, thrashing wildly, but it was useless. The ROC was the master of the skies. It lifted the giant higher and higher, the monster's roars growing fainter, higher still, until the giant was just a small speck against the vast blue canvas of the sky. And then, the Rorse opened its claws. The giant fell, a silent, screaming plummet into the endless ocean below. He vanished with a distant, almost imperceptible splash. The RC, its territory secured, circled once more before returning to its nest. It landed softly, its massive form shaking the cliff. The sailors inside the egg held their breath, their hearts pounding in their chests. They felt the bird gently nudge the egg, inspecting it for damage. Then, the world tilted sideways. They were moving. The ROC had picked up the egg containing Sinbad and his men, and with a powerful beat of its wings, it launched into the air. They felt the stomach-lurching swing as the ROC carried them high into the sky. One of the sailors, his voice trembling in the darkness, whispered, "Captain, we are flying." Sinbad, despite the terror, felt a sliver of relief. He nodded, though no one could see him. "We escaped. But we do not yet know where we are going." The ROC soared higher and higher, a tiny speck carrying a secret burden, flying them all toward an unknown fate. Their journey was far from over. In fact, the most dangerous part was only just beginning. The ROC flew for what felt like an eternity. Hours passed as it soared high above the clouds, a relentless engine of flesh and feather. Inside the claustrophobic confines of the egg, Sinbad and his two remaining sailors were cramped, bruised, and utterly terrified. Every powerful downbeat of the ROC's wings sent the eggs swinging wildly, tossing them against each other in the smelly, viscous fluid. Voice. One sailor's voice cut through the darkness, trembling with fear. "Captain, when it lands, will the ROC eat us?" Sinbad tried to sound confident, for their sake as much as his own. Rocks do not eat men. They hunt large animals for their young. We will be safe for now. But safe was a luxury they couldn't afford for long. Suddenly, without warning, the ROC let out a sharp, agitated screech. Its wings folded back, and the smooth, soaring flight turned into a rapid, gut-wrenching descent. The egg began to tumble and shake like a barrel rolling down a steep hill. The sailors clung to each other, unable to brace themselves in the chaotic darkness. Bright cracks of light burst through the shell around them. "Brace yourselves," Sinbad yelled over the rushing wind. The ROC had dropped the egg. They were falling. Down, down, down they plummeted, a fragile shell hurtling towards the earth. The end came with a deafening crash. The egg shattered on impact, exploding into 1,000 pieces. Sinbad was thrown clear, rolling across the ground, coughing and sputtering, completely covered in the foul-smelling yolk. He pushed himself up, his head spinning. The other two men stumbled to their feet beside him, dizzy and disoriented, but miraculously alive. They looked around, met. The sight that met their eyes stunned them into absolute silence. They were standing in the middle of a vast, deep valley, walled in on all sides by towering mountains of black, jagged rock. but it was the ground that stole their breath. The entire valley floor was not covered in dirt or grass, but was instead littered with shining stones of every color imaginable: blue, red, green, white, yellow. They crunched under their feet. Diamonds, rubies, sapphires, emeralds. It was a treasure beyond any king's wildest dreams. The bright sunlight hit the millions of facets, turning the entire valley into a shimmering, blinding sea of light. One of the sailors let out a choked cry and fell to his knees, running his hands through the gems as if they were sand. "Captain," he whispered in awe, "we are rich. We are rich beyond imagination." Sinbad stared, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible fortune that lay before them. They had escaped one monster only to land in a valley of treasure. But as he looked at the sheer, unclimbable walls surrounding them, a new kind of fear began to creep in. They were unimaginably wealthy, yes. But they were also trapped. Trapped in a glittering prison from which there seemed to be no escape. More jewels than a king's treasury. The sunlight flashed off every crystal, turning the valley into a shimmering sea of light. One sailor fell to his knees and ran his hands through the gems. "Captain, we are rich beyond imagination." Sinbad knelt and picked up a white diamond the size of a fist. He'd heard stories about a place like this. "The Valley of Diamonds," he said quietly. The others froze. Thorn told in sailors' stories. "Yes," Sinbad replied, "a place filled with riches but also difficult to escape." The sailors looked around. The walls of the valley were smooth cliffs, impossible to climb. They were trapped. And then, a loud hiss cut through the silence. The serpents of the valley from behind a pile of gems slithered a snake as thick as a tree trunk. 2. Its scales reflected light like polished metal, and its tongue flicked in and out with a sharp hiss. The sailors stepped back in horror. "Captain!" "What is that?" Sinbad answered with dread. "The reason the diamonds remain untouched." There were many stories about this valley. Powerful jewels, deadly snakes, no escape. Another serpent slid out from behind a rock, then another. Soon, 4 giant snakes surrounded them. One sailor whispered shakily, "We cannot fight creatures like that." Sinbad scanned the valley. Far away, he saw huge flocks of vultures and rocks circling the cliffs. Then he remembered the old sailor technique told in tavern tales. Rich men send meat from the cliffs above. It falls here and sticks to the diamonds. When birds pick up the meat to eat, the diamonds get carried out of the valley. He looked at the others. Which means humans must be watching from above. The men's fear turned slowly into hope. If they could attract attention, they might escape. A dangerous idea. The snakes were getting closer. Sinbad grabbed a large diamond and hurled it at one serpent's head. The gem bounced off harmlessly. The snake lunged. Sinbad rolled out of the way, grabbing a broken piece of ROC eggshell. Use the shell as shields. The 3 men held the curved pieces in front of them. The snake struck again and again, their fangs hitting the hard shell with sharp knocks. But they couldn't survive forever. Sinbad looked up at the cliffs and shouted, "Hey! Anyone up there? Help!" V's voice echoed in the valley, but no one replied. Another snake moved toward the sailors' left side. They were surrounded again. Sinbad made a decision. "We need to make ourselves noticed." He pointed to a pile of diamonds nearby. "Gather the largest ones. We will pile them in the open so the men above see something unusual." They worked fast, dodging snake strikes and throwing the biggest jewels into a shining pile. Within minutes, they had created a glittering tower of diamonds. Now they waited. A shadow passed over them. A Rosiet saw the pile of jewels and swooped lower. The giant's hunt. The ROC didn't care about men. It was looking for prey. But the snakes cared. The biggest serpent rose up, taller than a house, and struck at the bird. The ROC clawed at it, and a huge battle erupted. Feathers flew. Scales cracked. The valley shook. Sinbad yelled, "Run! This is our chance." They sprinted across the valley floor while the bird and snake fought behind them. A rope suddenly dropped from above. A voice shouted, "Grab it!" Sinbad didn't hesitate. He grabbed the rope, and the other sailors held on behind him. 4 men above pulled with all their strength, lifting Sinbad and his companions upward while the snakes hissed and struck below, just out of reach. Sinbad's heart pounded. The climb was long and slow, but at last hands grabbed him and pulled him over the cliff edge. He and the sailors collapsed on the ground, gasping. An old merchant with a grey beard looked at them in surprise. "Biola," he whispered, "we have never pulled men out of the valley before. Only diamonds." Sinbad smiled weakly. "This time, you got both, too." The treasure merchants stared at the diamonds, still stuck to the men's clothes from the fall. Their eyes widened. "You have been through a terrible fate," the leader said, "but you have survived. You are welcome among us." Sinbad nodded. He had lost many men. He had escaped death over and over. But he was alive and he had enough treasure to start a new life. Yet the sea still waited. The end.